Life after stroke. Returning to the community. Relationships.
When you're asking the spouse, particularly when they come home, to take over the nursing cares, you're actually changing the relationship, and that is not always good. If you're asking the wife and the lover to be the nurse and do the cares, you can be changing the whole relationship. So it's good that Sally's got a carer.
Yeah, and that's why I keep her.
Yes.
Because otherwise I find I'm looking at him as one of the
patient,
kids, as I treat one of the kids. And I have to pull myself up every now and again, because you just lose your dignity if someone talks to you like a child when you're an adult.
You've got this yellow rust.
The man that you left when he went into the hospital at the beginning of that stroke was just, no longer there. This was a totally different person that had come home, and you have to learn to accept that as well. And it was a learning process without a doubt. But we had lots of laughs about it too. There was always a bit of humour to be found, wasn't there?
There has been a couple of times that I've just wanted to go. I've just wanted to run. And there's a couple of times, there's one bad time I did want to run. We did have a big blow up, didn't we? But we talk about everything. We've always talked, and not talked, yelled every now and again at each other. We've never been placid people, and we've always said what we think. And I think that saved us in the end, didn't it?
It did. It's actually harder, looking on it from a stroke patient, it's actually harder on the other person, on the partner. Really is, because a person that's got the stroke has got it and can't do anything about it and has to live with that. But the other person has to virtually have the stroke without having the stroke, if you can understand what I mean. They have to become a stroke patient, and it's not very easy to do.
I'd have my karakia every morning and every night, to give me the strength to be patient, to be humble with my father, and to be humble with my family, because my family just pee me off too, because they don't understand what I understand about their papa's illness, my children, especially my little boy and my baby now. And they just see him, they say things like, oh yeah, stupid old goat, and because he's done something wrong, and then he turns around and he kicks out at them, and they tease him, and I have to keep on reminding them always, don't be like that to Papa. You got to try and teach my younger children what it's like to be afflicted by such an illness. What are the consequences? What happens to you when you have a stroke? Yeah.
Independence.
It's really, really hard for families who've had a loved person go through a major crisis, a major illness. It's really hard for them to back off and not help. They want to love their person and show how much they love and do everything for them and keep them wrapped up in cotton wool. And certainly in the acute phase, that's pretty appropriate, so that the person who's had a stroke does feel loved and cared about. But later on, when they're into rehabilitation, they have to put their hands behind their back and say, no, you're actually capable of doing that and you must do it yourself. That's what rehabilitation is, helping people learn to do things for themselves.
And I used to get outside, prune my roses, fall over, and still do it again. My daughter used to say to me, Mum, go back inside. You might get hurt. I'd say no. And I'd stay out there, prune my roses till they were finished. Everything I did, I wanted to do it myself, to help myself, I suppose.
Somebody's stumbling trying to find a word and you know what they're trying to say and you jump in and say the word for them and they just about go out through the roof because they're making all this effort and you go and blow it by saying the word for them. Just as if I was trying to do something or other, or I'm trying to put my shirt on and doing up buttons with one hand is quite a science all of its own. Doing up all the buttons, and somebody comes rushing in and says, "Oh, here, I'll do them all up for you."
Being accepted in the community.
For everybody, it's always an issue of how will my friends, my colleagues, my neighbours, how will they perceive me? Will they understand that even if my behaviour doesn't always show that I'm the same person, inside my head I'm the same person, and the person with the stroke wants to be treated as normal, as the person they've always been.
Some people are inclined to think that your brain's gone, and it's not just an arm or a leg that's a bit limp. They think your brain's gone as well, and some people talk down to you, but once again, my friends and acquaintances have not been like that. I'm still accepted as the person I was and am.
I just get out and talk to normal people. Because that's how I am. I want to be normal. I am normal other than being in a chair and paralysed. Otherwise, my brain's perfectly normal.
One thing that annoys me is my friends that I had prior to having the stroke pretty much abandoned me. You certainly know who your real friends are and family. It's only when you're starting to look a lot better than you were at first, so you start to slowly creep back into the picture.
Just as it takes time to build up a friendship with a person, it takes time to renew a friendship with a person who is in a lot of subtle ways quite different from the person who was a friend previously. So the person who's had a stroke needs to give them time and recognise that they need time, and perhaps even make opportunities where that friendship can be renewed in non-threatening ways. So perhaps not in a very public place, but perhaps coming to the home, and even just sitting and doing some activity, watching television, watching rugby, side by side without even having to talk or interact, but just being with each other.
Where do you have a rest?
I had a friend, Peter Leach from Auckland, the Mad Butcher. He was a great friend, one of many super friends I've got. And Peter did a bit of homespun psychology with me. He rang me, he said, "I'm coming down to Christchurch, mate. We're going to go to the league. We're old league friends." And I hadn't been out at night. He says, "You take you along, you'll meet all your old friends from league and the players." And I said, "Oh, Peter, I haven't been out at night." He said, "No, you'll be right, you'll be right." And I started worrying about this night game. I haven't stayed awake I've just out of hospital. Will I stay awake that long? What if I need to go to the toilet during the game? How am I going to get there? All these doubts. I had a million reasons why it wasn't going to work. I went along with Peter. I had a super night. I was well taken care of by everybody. And Peter told me a lot later, he had known of my fears. He had realised them. But he thought that sooner or later I had to get out and about and see people again. I just couldn't shut myself away in a room. And that was a big part of my recovery.
No, it's all right. You take care. Okay? See you later.
I wouldn't go out, but to go places not to eat out. One day I will go home in my own privacy and pick out myself, so people won't see me. But I'm okay now. I go out now, and I'm not pakama like I used to be. And yeah. But I'm a new person now. Do you have a wife before? It wasn't easy at that time, but now I can say that I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Small one.
What's that?
But as far as
Got one there.
it looks like
26. That'll do. And anything else?
If a person's assertive, they can express their needs clearly and ask for them to be met without feeling guilty, without feeling that they're inferior in some way. And they can also refuse help, so that a person in a wheelchair may say, "Would you mind opening the door for me? I'm having a little bit of difficulty with a heavy door." But equally they can also say, "Thank you, I don't need help with this, I would like to do it myself," which is what rehabilitation's all about. If you do something every day for a person with a disability that they could do themselves, at the end of a year, you've taken away 365 abilities from them.
Organising the day.
One of the major stresses for a person who's had a stroke is dealing with the fatigue. Because their physical abilities may be reduced, then ordinary everyday tasks become much more taxing. Having a shower, getting dressed, takes a lot longer and is a lot more tiring. So something as simple as planning to go down to see your doctor may be the sort of thing that was dealt with in the past prior to the stroke with like a quick shower, quick dress, zip in the car down to the doctor. It now becomes a major part of the day and becomes almost like a military exercise to plan it so it goes smoothly, so that it's not something that's threatening and provokes fear in the person.
You're allowed to see what happened.
No.
Oh, you're doing extremely well.
You plan, you over-plan things. You're going to go to the movies. Access to in and out of a theatre, and egress, how you're going to get in and out of a theatre. You actually plan it well ahead, and everything takes extra time. You start worrying about how you'll get into the theatre, how will you get out, where will I sit, can people get past me? You've got to overcome these things, and the sooner you can do it, the better. It does put a lot of pressure on your carer. And I was lucky with my wife Lorraine, she's marvellous, but you've got to do these things. You've got to get out and face life again. You can't hide away. It's like many things, the longer you leave it, the longer it is before you're going to be able to do it, the harder it's going to be when you do it.
Things have taken a bit longer, but I've achieved a lot, and the more you achieve, the more confidence you get, and you just keep trying different things, and if they work, and if they don't, well, you think, well, okay, that's something I'm going to have to give a miss to. But I had a very full and active life, and I think because of that, I wasn't quite willing to let it all go. I wanted to sort of see what I could still do.
Returning to work.
Our aim long term is to support them back into work for sure, but we need to take steps along the way. Sometimes it means talking to employers, and that can be the occupational therapist who's often involved in that, looking at what are the practical input that they may need in the way of equipment or in other ways that they may need to actually make that possible, or discuss those things with their employers too in terms of how important rest might be and what kind of jobs might be possible to do and not possible to do.
I had no job. My husband had left, and I sort of thought, well, I've got to survive in some way, and I'm still a reasonable age, got sort of many years to go, and I just sort of thought, well, I've just got to sort of think about what I'm going to do, and for some reason, I have no idea why, I started at the bottom. I'd sort of been at the top a little bit, and suddenly everything that was very foreign to me was really all I was going to be able to cope with. and I had to accept that fact as well as trying to find someone that would sort of take me on. So it took a long time, but to start with, doing jobs that I couldn't relate to, I couldn't compare them with jobs that I'd done before, was actually very good for me, because I sort of thought, if I can do this job, it's actually new, it's different, and no one knows what I've been through, what I used to do, and that gave me a lot of encouragement, you know, sort of for myself.
Through the hospital again, I was able to do one-handed typing courses. I worked on the theory that, well, before I used 4 fingers typing, 2 on each hand. So I'd use 4 fingers on one hand, it's no different, but actually it is. But I cover the whole span of the keyboard in a special course for left-hand typing only. And there's certain adjustments I've made. So I went back doing some relieving in various roles at work, no guaranteed employment, but I've worked in Christchurch, Ashburton, I've produced talkback, Timaru, Invercargill 3 times. I'm back in just done a spell in Invercargill for 10 weeks. But it's not guaranteed work.
Then it was time to sort of apply for a job in the real world. And there was very little about. And I applied for a job at a supermarket. And it was in a greengrocery department, which I thought, this is really hitting the bottom of the barrel for you, Carol. So I went along, and somebody had resigned in the delicatessen. So I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a go. And when I got home, I thought, what have you done? The thought of picking up pans with hot fat and chickens and things, and when my coordination and balance wasn't very good, I thought, this is really going to be a test. And I was very slow and very nervous to start with. But day by day, things came back to me, and I didn't have a problem with taking trays out of the oven with hot fat and things. And so that gave me a lot of confidence in my coordination and my balance, that it was getting a bit better. And it was during that job that I sort of thought, right, now's the time to take the step to apply for a clerical job. And I got this one. Hi, Savada, any folders for me?
Just 2 there for you,
Oh,
Carol.
great, thanks.
My experience of being interviewed for positions is I had to be after the first job after my stroke failed. What I used to do was to wait until the interview was well underway, when I felt I had a rapport with the people doing the interview. When you think that they're on your side, if you can get them into that sort of frame of mind already, then you can open it up. Certainly I don't think you can go to an employer without hiding the stroke. It's a question of timing. Something you've got to tell them before they offer you the job. But after they've had an opportunity to see that, yes, you can do the job.
To start with, it was very hard to admit that I had a disability. You tend to try and pretend it's not there, which is silly, because it's actually harder. If you admit that you have a disability and people know about it, were very supportive. They would sort of explain things 2 or 3 times. They didn't mind writing me a note and leaving me a message. They took a little bit more time. They would say, do you understand what I want, or what I need? And that was really good, because it didn't sort of make you sort of feel that you were being a hindrance and that you weren't sort of picking things up as fast. Those that didn't know, it was a little bit harder to sort of come to terms with, but you've just got to sort of make the effort to let them know that you're not taking things in quite as quickly as perhaps they do. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Good, thanks. For the weekend?
Yes, thanks. Lovely. There you go. That's for you.
Thanks a lot. If I was to do it again, I think I'd start with the employment agencies. They were the ones that put me onto the task force green job. And they seem to have contacts with all sorts of different firms and clientele and things that are looking for people to do jobs, and they seem to know what level of person they're looking for. They were very helpful in my situation. And I think not aiming at the top straight away, you've got to start down at the bottom and look at realistic things and take things one day at a time and just work your way up to a level that you're happy with. I think the main thing is not to give up. Things take a lot longer than they may have done sort of years ago. You just got to keep persevering.
Driving.
One day, when I was coming home from Dunedin, a man came and sat beside me in the bus. He must have been watching me because he said, "You don't need to travel in buses. I've only got one hand and I can drive a 10-ton truck. You could learn to drive a car." I came back to Picton with my head in the clouds and stars in my eyes, went to the doctor to ask if I could learn to drive a car. After they'd found my eyesight was all right, they had to prove that my epilepsy was all right. I had become epileptic. I only have big ones if something goes wrong with the medication, and nothing does go wrong with it now. It's perfectly under control. I just have what I call wobbly chins now. I have this rather horrid feeling coming, and I think, oh, yuck, here we go again, and my chin starts to wobble. It only lasts a few seconds. I don't go unconscious. They told me if ever I had one while driving, I should pull over and stop.
There are two major issues that we're wanting to find out related to post-driving after the stroke. The first one is physically how the stroke is going to affect their ability to drive, and from our perspective that's the least of the problems because technology and ability to modify vehicles solves most of those kinds of problems. So whether the degree of paralysis and whether it's on the left or the right and is probably less of an issue following driving. The main problem is whether the stroke has affected the cognitive function related to driving. So we're talking about memory and concentration and reaction times and ability to make decisions. The assessment is an indicator of what we would expect to occur with on-road driving. So the assessment will tell us whether we would expect there to be problems in given driving situations. The second stage of the assessment is an on-road, usually in the individual's own car, and will cover the quiet suburban roads, shopping centres and motorway driving. For a number of people it's just resume unrestricted driving. For some people it will be to drive in the local area only, and unfortunately on some occasions we will advise people not to resume driving at all. The majority of people that we see following a stroke get back to driving in their local area for a good number of years.
Stroke Foundation Field Officers.
Well, we have a field officer who's often talked about field officers being gap fillers, and I guess that's a pretty good way to describe us. But we must also be careful not to provide a position of dependency, someone that the stroke person and their families become dependent on, because the aim of the Stroke Foundation is to empower people to take charge of their lives again following a stroke, but sometimes they just need someone to help them along the way, and that's the role that the field officer tries to provide. Just generally settling down, doing lots of listening, finding out what some of the problems are, and perhaps suggesting ways in which things might be able to be tackled more easily. We try not to give advice. It's really, have you thought of trying it this way? Or there is such a thing that we can get the occupational therapists to supply that might help you with that problem.
Finding the rehab that they are eligible for, making sure that they do keep appointments for physio and speech and occupational therapy, and perhaps they're relying on families that, some of the people here may not have cars or family that are available to help. So it's making sure that they get onto that sort of thing really early on, because statistics have proved that if they get those things right at the beginning, the chances of rehab are much higher.
Stroke Foundation Stroke Clubs.
Stroke clubs, support groups are really, really important. Our intrinsic worth doesn't come from what we believe about ourselves, it comes from what other people reflect back to us. So that if you're isolating yourself from society, from positive feedback, you're contributing to feeling badly about yourself. So it's really important to get out, mix with other people, get those little niceties that we get from other people, the little reinforcers, even if it's just a smile or someone showing some concern, asking how you're getting on, how the recovery's going, is really, really important.
When you're out in the normal world, you do worry about, you're very self-conscious. A lot of people are self-conscious about how they look, how they speak, things like that. After you've had a stroke, and when you're with the same people that have stroke, you don't feel these things. You don't really worry about what, how you speak, what you look like, or anything like that.
Meeting other people who have had strokes and brain hemorrhages, you sort of think you're the only one out there, but then suddenly you meet all these other people that have it, and you realise that I'm not the only one that's had a brain hemorrhage. There are heaps of others that have too, so it makes life a bit easier, and you can compare notes with other people who've had them. It just makes life a bit easier.
The stroke clubs do more for the stroke people than anybody realises, I think. I've seen chaps come along there and you wouldn't get too well for them. After a bit of motivation, they're bowling, they're playing cards, they're doing everything. And they're looking forward to coming back next week.
I'm lucky to join the stroke club, and I say to myself that is a family to me. That is my family. It's people that the same feeling, the same sort of thinking, and all that stuff.
When you've been being spoon-fed and looked after and cosseted for a long time, suddenly to find that you can perhaps help somebody else does wonders for the morale. Most of the things that I used to do before I can still do. There are a few things I can't do. A well-known and well-loved prayer says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change." Quite literally, there are 3 things I cannot change. The first is a nappy, the second is a tyre, the third is a light bulb on a long dangly flex. Other things I cannot do. I cannot play my violin or my recorder, and the world is no less happy a place for that. I cannot upside down a pavlova onto a plate. I cannot gift wrap a soccer ball. I cannot with any semblance of dignity eat prawns in a high-class restaurant. I cannot cut my right-hand fingernails. That's what husbands are for.
For more information or assistance, please contact your local Stroke Foundation office or ring 0800 Stroke 0800 787 653.